Alright, there are a couple points I totally forgot to talk about, and so I thought it was really important just to kind of mention it before I close out this video. Sorry, I know it's getting kind of long, but there's just so much that happens in this section that I can't not talk about it. Basically, there's this part where, like, Ants is like, oh, like, talking to Ant. This is Dewey Dell's chapter, and Ants is talking to Dewey Dell, and he's like, oh, you're so ungrateful. Like, I raised you for X amount of years or whatever. It's like the classic, like, I did all this for you parent trap talk, where he's like, I have fed you, I sheltered you, I gave you love and care, yet my own daughter, the daughter of my dead wife, calls me a thief over her mother's grave. And basically, the money that Dewey Dell gets from her person, the $10, Ants basically takes. And it's like, he's really selfish about it, and like this goes back to the whole like talk about how like Ants is just a terrible person, a terrible parent, and he basically leverages Addie's death against Dewey Dell so he can take Dewey Dell's money to get his new teeth, basically. And he says it's a loan, but obviously, like, he's not really gonna pay back the $10, is he? Because once that money's gone, I doubt he's getting it back for her. And what's even worse is that, like, Dewey Dell says that $10 isn't even hers, it's Cora's, but, you know, obviously we do know that she did get money from her lover, so, I don't know. She might just be saying that to, like, hide it, but at the same time, it's, like, it's kind of terrible how, like, Ants just treats his children. First Cash with his leg, then sending Darl away like that, and basically not even fighting for him. And, like, then with, like, with Addie's burial, like, it goes over so fast, you know? The burial, like, everyone kind of glazes over it because they all have their own life problems, basically, and everyone, like, the family's falling apart, so, like, her burial is just, like, it seems small in the context of what's happening in everyone else's life. And yeah, it was funny because, like, they had to borrow the spades to bury her, and, like, Peabody mentioned something about this where he's like, oh, of course he would have to borrow spades in order to get, Addie buried, you know? It's like, that's how helpless and useless Ants is, you know? He kind of made a mention on that, but, yeah, basically, it's like Ants just relies on everyone. He's a parasite, basically, on everyone in his life, and it's really terrible how, you know, he basically kind of leeches off Dewey Dell at her, like, worst moment. And in a way that kind of reflects her pregnancy, because, you know, some people who really hate babies, they might see, like, a baby as, like, a cancerous growth, like someone parasitic, like, feeding off of your nutrients that you eat, kind of. Obviously, it's, like, a dark take on pregnancy, but, you know, it kind of is similar to that. So, yeah, and then in the end, we find out that, yeah, he does use the $10 that he stole from Dewey Dell, along with a lot of other money from other sources. And he basically gets new teeth and gets a new wife. Because at the very end, of course, he's like, meet Mrs. Bundren, he says, and that's, like, the big, like, bombshell that he drops on everyone. It's just so terrible. But yeah, it's like, basically, at the end, all the kids are worse off than they started, and then Ants basically gets everything he wants. And, it makes me so mad at Ants, but at the same time, I think it's the perfect ending for, like, this time period of writing. I think, is it called, like, realism or something? Because, like, isn't how, like, the new generation kind of has, like, this, like, teenage angst built up where they're, like, looking at older generations, older structures, systems, like, religious systems, and kind of, like, throwing it back and saying, like, you know, we don't want it, like, this is not what we wanted, this is not what we expected, like, it's making us worse off, basically, and just throwing off the older generations and the old systems and the old ways. And I think that's why the ending's perfect, because it's basically just illustrating how it's, like, the old just keep leeching and leeching and taking, and then what do the young have, basically. I know it's like this could be one of those things where it's, like, taken into context in today, kind of like the fight between, like, baby boomers and, like, millennials, you know, how it's, like, how, like, millennials, like, don't have their own homes, but then also they're, like, oh, but college, and, like, all the different opportunities, and, like, millennials being, like, the first generation that aren't as well off as, like, their previous generations. I don't know, it's kind of like that, where it can be taken into context in that way, but yeah, I just, the ending makes me so mad at Ants, but at the same time, it's definitely perfect for this book. So, yeah. And we definitely know that Ants is a little bit guilty about it, just because he says, Cash says, tells them about Mrs. Bundren, kind of like a hangdog and proud too, with his teeth and all, even if he wouldn't look at it. So that implies like he was guilty about like what he did, basically leeching off his children. And by being guilty, that kind of shows that he knows how bad what he's doing, like how bad his actions are, yet he does it anyways. So I don't know. This ending is so good, but it just gets me so mad at ants. That's all I had to say.